Welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn about nuclear chemistry. Specifically, we'll learn how to balance nuclear reactions when they undergo various radioactive decay processes, including alpha decay, beta decay, and positron emission. We'll then also learn about the different particles that are emitted during these processes. So a nuclear reaction is one that changes the nucleus of the atoms involved. And this is different from chemical reactions, where only the electrons in the valence shells are involved in the chemical reactions. The nuclei stay the same in a chemical reaction. For example, if you take a molecule of sugar and you combust it with oxygen, it converts into carbon dioxide and water. Now, while the identities and characteristics of the molecules involved are changing, the identities of the atoms involved stay the same. If you count up the number of each element on both sides of the equation, you'll see that they are equal. For a nuclear reaction, however, this is not the case. And the reason for this is because nuclear reactions involve unstable isotopes that spontaneously emit particles and energy through radioactive decay or radioactive emission. And because these isotopes have differing numbers of neutrons, some of them will be stable and some will be unstable. For example, hydrogen has three different isotopes. With the first isotope has 0 neutrons, 1 neutron, and then 2 neutrons. The one with 1 neutron is called deuterium. The one with 2 neutrons is called tritium. This is an example of tritium undergoing a radioactive decay process. You can see what has happened is we've converted a neutron into a proton. And so it's no longer a hydrogen atom, but a helium atom. And it has ejected an electron as part of that process. So the main idea here is the identities of the elements change during nuclear processes. Now let's talk about the different types of nuclear decay, all of which are emissions in these examples. Our first type that we'll discuss is alpha decay. An alpha particle is the nucleus of a helium atom. That means that we have 2 protons and 2 neutrons, so the total mass is 4 AMU. And when it undergoes a nuclear reaction, we have our parent nucleus with its starting mass and proton number. It ejects the helium atom, and the daughter nucleus, it has 4 fewer mass units and 2 fewer protons. For beta decay, we have the release of a beta particle, which in other words is just an electron. So electrons we saw earlier have a negative charge, but have essentially no mass. Because they're about 1,000th the mass of a proton and a neutron, we can essentially ignore their mass. So when we look at a generic nuclear reaction involving beta decay, we have taken and converted a neutron into a proton, and we also release an electron. So the proton number goes up for the daughter nucleus, but the total mass of that isotope stays the same. Then we have positron emission, which releases a positron particle. And you can see here that a positron particle is essentially a positively charged electron. So it will have the opposite result on the parent and the daughter, the daughter nucleus. That is that because we're releasing a positively charged particle, we're converting a proton in the nucleus of the atom into a neutron, and that lowers its proton number. Finally, we have gamma emission. And this is where we emit a gamma ray photon, which is pure energy. And so it doesn't change the mass of the atom in any way, including the number of protons. Something to notice in all of these balanced nuclear reactions is that the mass numbers and the atomic numbers must be balanced. So because in an alpha particle, we emit a particle that has 2 protons and 4 total mass units, when you add together both particles on the product side of the reaction, they must sum to be the same value as what's on the left. Let's look a little bit more into alpha decay. Alpha decay involves emitting a helium nucleus, and it causes the parent nucleus to lose 2 protons and 2 neutrons. So for example, we can write the balanced nuclear reaction for the alpha decay of uranium-238. Now, when you're solving any of these types of reactions, you want to start by writing out the identity of the parent nucleus, and you need to include the proton number. The way that you determine the proton number is by finding that element on the periodic table and identifying the number of protons. In this case, it's 92. We then write out what the particle is that's released, and in this case, it is an alpha particle. So we release the alpha particle with a mass of 4 and 2 protons. So to identify the substance that is produced as part of this, we subtract 4 mass units, and we subtract 2 protons, and that leaves us with the substance of thorium. Here's a practice problem for you to try. Pause the video and see if you can determine this one on your own. Welcome back. So we want to know, what is the isotope that results from the alpha decay process of americium-241? So what we do is we start by writing out the identity of the parent nucleus, americium-241. Examining the periodic table gets us a proton number of 95. Since we know we're performing alpha decay, we write out the helium nucleus and the mass of 4 and the proton number 2. So then we subtract 4 mass units, leaving us with 237. We subtract 2 protons, leaving us with 93 protons. Looking then at the periodic table, we can see that this is neptunium 237. That gives us an answer choice of C. Now, this process actually occurs in many households around the world that have smoke detectors. One way that smoke detectors work is by emitting radioactive particles within a sealed chamber that keeps the radiation from exiting and harming you. And what it ends up doing is it creates an electrical circuit. And so when smoke enters that chamber, it takes away some of the electrical charge. It stops the circuit, it breaks the circuit, and that triggers the alarm. Let's now turn our attention to beta decay. This is where we are taking a neutron within the nucleus of an atom and converting it into a proton and an electron. The electron is then ejected from the nucleus at a very high speed. So for example, we could write out the balanced nuclear reaction for the beta decay of cobalt-60. As always, we start by writing the identity of the parent nucleus, cobalt, with 60 mass units. Looking at the periodic table, you see that cobalt's proton number is 27. Since we're emitting a beta particle, that is equivalent to an electron with a -1 charge and no mass. So the mass of our daughter nucleus does not change. However, the number of protons does, and it ends up being 28. The way that you can confirm this is the case, we see that on the left we have 27 protons. On the right, when you add together 28 and -1, you get 27. So what's the 27th element? That would be nickel. This process is actually used very commonly in chemotherapy treatments. So cobalt-60 is a very important isotope for people in the medical industry. We then have positron emission. During positron emission, it's kind of the opposite of beta decay. So we convert a proton into a neutron in the nucleus, and then a positron is ejected from the nucleus at a very high speed. And a positron is essentially an antimatter version of an electron, which if you'd like to learn more about, you can study more about particle physics. So let's write the balanced nuclear reaction for fluorine-18 undergoing positron emission. As always, we start by writing out the parent nucleus Looking at the periodic table, you find that it is element number 9. It then emits a positron, which we write out as an electron with a positive charge. We see that the mass does not change. So the mass of our daughter isotope will have 18, and its element number will be 8, leaving us with oxygen. And fluorine-18 is commonly used in the medical industry as well. It's used for PET imaging. What we do is we take a sugar molecule and we replace a hydroxyl group, an OH group, with fluorine-18. Your body can then digest, or ingest rather, the 18-fluoroglucose. And as it passes through your system, it gives off the positrons. Those get picked up by the detector and then are used to just scan your body. Let's now talk about the final aspect of radiation that we're going to discuss, and that's gamma emission. This occurs when the nucleus of the parent atom is at a very high energy state and it drops down to a lower energy state. This emits radiation in the form of pure energy. Since it's just energy, the number of protons and neutrons does not change. And this form of decay actually accompanies other forms. So when we saw beta emission, when we saw positron emission, when we saw alpha decay, those are also releasing gamma rays. And we see that gamma rays are very highly penetrating. They can go through your body, they can go through water, they can go through concrete. It takes lead casing in order to stop gamma rays. And we see that the different types of radioactive decay particles are able to penetrate at different lengths. And this is what provides them with their utility or their lethality. So beta particles, because they can pass through your body, they're able to be used in the different imaging systems. However, alpha particles cannot pass through your body. They can only make it as far as they get stopped even by a sheet of paper. So if you were to ingest a radioactive isotope that emits alpha particles, that would do terrible destruction to your body since it's not able to exit your body. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.